Honestly, who in their right mind aspires to be a forensic accountant? It's just so incredibly beige. The ripple of laughter that followed her words felt like frostbite crawling across my skin. My brother's fiancé, Victoria, lifted her heavy crystal wine glass with a meticulously polished smile. She held it up as if she were a lead prosecutor resting a winning, flawless argument before a jury. "She's not wrong, you have to admit," Victoria added lightly, swirling her vintage Bordeaux. My father, Harrison, offered a deep, resonant chuckle. Our Elena has always been the cautious one, safe, predictable. My mother, Margaret, didn't miss a beat to join the chorus, adjusting her pearl necklace. "We just hope you meet a nice, grounded man someday, dear. Your job is... well, it's very stable. That's a blessing." Victoria leaned forward over the candlelit table, adjusting her posture to deliver the final, calculated slice with practiced elegance. "It's actually kind of adorable that you think your little spreadsheet hobby is a functioning business. Have you ever felt like the invisible ghost haunting your own family's perfect, glossy portrait? Like you are the designated punchline to a joke you never agreed to be part of? Let me know your story down in the comments below." I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer the defensive reaction they were all so desperately thirsting for. I simply set my heavy silver fork down. The sharp, metallic clink against the edge of my bone china plate sliced cleanly through the suffocating chatter. The table instantly fell silent. They were waiting for the usual routine, waiting for me to shrink back into my chair, to force a self-deprecating laugh, to apologize for simply taking up oxygen in their orbit. Instead, I lifted my chin and looked straight into Victoria's eyes. Her face was an absolute mask of flawless, expensive skincare, radiant confidence, and sheer, unfiltered smugness. "You're talking about Veritrace AI," I said. My voice was a dead calm, as flat and unreadable as a frozen lake. Even Victoria's pristine smile flickered, just for a microsecond. The mask slipped. She hadn't expected the quiet accountant to recognize the name, let alone say it aloud. "Yes," she replied smoothly, her vocal fry returning as she recovered her footing. "That charming, scrappy little AI startup. My venture capital fund is currently reviewing their tech. We're planning to acquire it for absolute pennies. It's a distressed asset, really." "Really?" She gave a dismissive, breathy little laugh. "The founders are clueless. They don't even understand what they—" "You can't buy it," I said, slicing through her sentence like a scalpel. My brother, Derek, shifted his weight in his chair, visibly irritated by my sudden defiance. "Elena, don't do this. Don't make things awkward for Victoria at dinner." I completely ignored him. My gaze stayed locked, laser-focused on Victoria. "You can't buy the diet," I repeated, letting each word land like a heavy stone. "Because I own it. Veritrace AI is mine." The sudden, paralyzing silence in that $450 per plate Michelin-starred restaurant grew exponentially heavier, suffocatingly denser than the Wagyu beef cooling on the table between us. Let me take a moment to give you a clearer picture of my family dynamics, because context is everything. They aren't inherently evil or intentionally malicious. No. They are simply dedicated performers acting out a relentless script of high society perfection. My parents, Harrison and Margaret, practically breathe the crisp, manicured air of the local country club. Their entire existence revolves around the exhausting currency of public appearances and social leverage. To them, achievement isn't an internal state of mind. It's highly visible. Harrison measures a man's worth by his golf handicap, while Margaret evaluates a woman's success by the carat size on her left hand. To them, winning is the leather scent of a brand-new European luxury sedan, a booming, commanding handshake at a charity gala, and a corner office title embossed on heavy, expensive cardstock. Then there is my older brother, Derek. He is the undisputed golden child of the household, a wildly charismatic commercial real estate broker. Derek has always been phenomenal at talking his way into a room, though he arguably speaks far more than he actually works. Yet, somehow, the massive commission checks always manage to clear the bank. And perhaps most importantly to my parents' grand sweeping narrative, he is engaged to a cutthroat, aggressive venture capitalist like Victoria. Derek doesn't just succeed, he dazzles, he shines with a blinding, manufactured light. And then, sitting quietly at the edge of the photograph, there is me, Elena, 32 years old, Senior Forensic Accountant. I am the reliable one, the predictably boring one, the utterly forgettable one. I am the person they only dial when corporate tax season suddenly gets complicated or when a family trust needs auditing. I am the woman they habitually speak over at holiday cocktail parties, the perpetual designated driver who makes sure everyone gets home safely, the muted, gray backdrop to their vibrant, carefully curated lives. I am the necessary shadow that makes their blinding spotlight appear so much brighter. But here is the singular, unbreakable truth they never bothered to look for. What they never, ever knew was that while they were busy performing for their social circles, I was relentlessly building. I spent my Friday nights not at rooftop mixers, but diving deep into encrypted offshore ledgers, training my machine learning models to spot microscopic anomalies in massive datasets. For 5 grueling, solitary years, I had been secretly developing Veritrace AI. It is an advanced forensic algorithmic tool capable of detecting highly complex, deeply buried financial fraud in a matter of milliseconds. We are talking about the kind of sophisticated corporate embezzlement that would normally take entire teams of seasoned Wall Street analysts 6 months to painstakingly uncover. My creation wasn't flashy. It didn't scream for public validation or demand to be the center of attention. It simply executed its job flawlessly, just like me. And just last Tuesday, while my mother was busy picking out white floral arrangements for Derek's engagement party, I had quietly, without a single drop of celebratory champagne, signed an exclusive, multi-year licensing agreement for my software. The deal was worth exactly $14.5 million. When I finally left that stifling, overheated Michelin-starred restaurant later that evening, I didn't feel the intoxicating rush of victory I thought I would. After Victoria's perfectly contoured face completely drained of its rosy color, and after my brother Derek stumbled over a series of aggressively confused, half-formed questions, I didn't walk out feeling triumphant. No, I just felt a bone-deep, marrow-aching exhaustion. Driving back to my quiet neighborhood, gripping the cold leather of the steering wheel, the brutal truth hit me. I realized exactly why I had guarded my success so fiercely for 5 long years. It was never about false modesty. It was purely about self-preservation. It was my armor. I parked my sensible sedan outside my dimly lit apartment building, but I couldn't bring myself to unbuckle my seatbelt. I just sat there in the driveway. The engine ticked softly as it cooled down in the freezing night air. The dashboard cast a pale blue glow across my face. And suddenly, the puzzle pieces snapped together. It made perfect sense. In the realm of psychology, there is a specific, clinical term for toxic dynamics like the one festering inside my family. It's a performative system, entirely constructed on a fragile, hollow foundation of public appearances. Systems like mine require a designated golden child. Derek fills that casting call flawlessly. He operates as a human mirror, reflecting a stylized version of success back to my parents. He lives out the highly visible, materialistic dreams they so deeply admire. His flashy, empty wins validate their parenting. But for the scale to balance, they also desperately need a counterweight. A designated scapegoat. That, unfortunately, was my lifelong role. I wasn't a boring person by nature. I was boring by design. I was carefully molded into the ultimate, safe comparison point, the low bar they could all comfortably measure themselves against, to feel vastly superior. My steady, quiet competence was the dull gray canvas that made Derek's loud, erratic ambitions seem so incredibly dazzling. By playing the built-in, lesser version of a daughter, I gave them unspoken permission to completely overlook my intellect in favor of his hollow achievements. And tonight, with a few quiet sentences, I had completely shattered their carefully engineered structure. I naively thought the undeniable truth, the massive, gravitational weight of a $14.5 million tech deal, would finally force them to actually see me, to respect me. I was so incredibly wrong. The second I walked through my front door, my phone screen violently lit up the dark hallway. There were absolutely no apologies waiting for me, only an immediate, vicious escalation. The first rapid-fire text was from my mother, Margaret. "Elena, you completely humiliated Victoria tonight in public. I do not know where you picked up such incredibly tacky, bitter behavior. You need to call her and apologize this instant before you ruin your brother's life." I stood in my kitchen, staring blankly at the glowing screen. Tacky. Mere moments later, Derek's text chimed in, practically vibrating with rage. Are you completely out of your mind? You just actively sabotaged a huge networking opportunity for me. Victoria was actually trying to help our family. What is fundamentally wrong with you? Why are you always so deeply jealous? You literally ruin everything you touch. I slowly scrolled through the barrage of angry notifications, my thumb swiping over the venom. I was searching, desperately, for just one single, logical question. Is it true? What exactly is Veritrace AI? You made $14.5 million? Nothing. A total, deafening void. There was not one single inquiry about my groundbreaking software, not one solitary syllable about the multi-million-dollar licensing deal that would change my life forever. It hit me then, washing over me like ice water. They weren't upset or intimidated by my sudden financial success. They were furious that I had dared to step out of my assigned, subservient role. They weren't shocked by the revelation of the truth. They were enraged that I had spoken it aloud and disrupted their comfortable, collective illusion. I had cracked the sacred family image. The raw anger bleeding through their text messages didn't make me cry. Instead, it gifted me with a strange, beautiful, and razor-sharp clarity. This family dynamic was never about unconditional love, mutual respect, or support. It was only ever about absolute control. And right then, standing in the cold light of my kitchen, I decided I was completely done playing my part in their tragedy. A full week dragged by. Just long enough for the deafening silence from my family to curdle from hostile rejection into a heavy, suffocating pressure. Then, the highly anticipated envelope finally arrived in my mailbox. It wasn't a conciliatory text. It wasn't an apologetic phone call. It was a thick, textured, cream-colored parchment card. The kind of aggressive, heavy stock stationery that costs $15 a pop, stamped with raised gold-embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Derek and Victoria at the Oak Ridge Country Club. I held the heavy card in my hands, feeling its weight. This was not a friendly invitation. This was a formal summons. A subpoena wrapped in elegant calligraphy, commanding me to get back into my assigned lane. To show up, paste on a supportive smile, wear a bland navy dress, and publicly pretend that the disastrous dinner had never occurred. They were aggressively resetting the family narrative. They were betting everything that my primal fear of being socially exiled was much stronger than my desperate need to be respected. They assumed I would fold like a cheap suit. They completely forgot who they were dealing with. I am a forensic accountant. I do not engage in screaming matches. I do not throw emotional tantrums. I audit. I sat down at my minimalist desk and flipped open my laptop. I wasn't thinking about the $14.5 million anymore. I was obsessively replaying Victoria's smug, surprised face at the restaurant. I was dissecting her exact words. We're planning to acquire it for absolute pennies. Why would she use those specific words? How did she even know the internal state of Veritrace AI in the first place? And then, my memory clicked. 6 weeks ago, purely as a stress test for the market, I had dispatched a severely limited, encrypted sandbox demo of Veritrace AI to 15 top-tier venture capital firms. I sent it blindly from a masked burner email under a fake shell corporation, Apex Ledger Solutions. Victoria's firm had been on that exact mailing list. I immediately pulled up my secure server access logs. My fingers flew across the backlit keyboard. I wasn't angry anymore. I was hyper-focused. This was my native domain. This was the raw ledger, and the raw numbers absolutely never lie. I cross-referenced the encrypted IP addresses and the timestamps, and there it was, glowing on my screen. The persistent access logs originating directly from Victoria's VC firm. Dozens of aggressive attempts. They weren't just politely reviewing the demo's features. They were actively pinging the firewall. They were running sophisticated brute force breach protocols. They were desperately trying to smash past the sandbox environment and rip into my proprietary core code. They weren't just reviewing my company for an acquisition. They were actively trying to break into it. But that wasn't even the most brilliant part. I am a forensic auditor. I build ruthless software specifically designed to catch the smartest, most elusive corporate thieves on Wall Street. Did they honestly, genuinely think I wouldn't have lethal countermeasures buried deep inside the demo's source code? I had planted a little trap, a digital canary trap. It was a beautiful, entirely harmless-looking string of decoy code. But if anyone maliciously tried to copy, export, or reverse engineer that specific section, it would silently, invisibly activate their laptop's webcam and microphone, secretly recording the exact next 5 minutes of their meeting. I navigated through my terminal to the secure quarantine folder. My heart was thumping a steady, adrenaline-fueled rhythm against my ribs. There was one single, encrypted MP4 file sitting there, dated exactly 6 weeks ago. I clicked play. The video flickered to life. And there she was, Victoria, sitting in a sleek, glass-walled corporate conference room, leaning aggressively over a MacBook with 2 of her senior back-end engineers. "This architecture is annoying," one of the frustrated engineers was complaining. "The security protocols are way too tight. We can't get anywhere near the core logic." And then Victoria's voice, clear, razor cold, and dripping with corporate arrogance, filled my quiet apartment. "Forget going through the front door. We don't need to actually buy it. Just shatter this piece right here," she commanded, pointing a manicured nail at the screen. "Extract the core algorithm, and we'll build our own in-house clone. By the time we launch it, the clueless little bean counter who coded this garbage will never even know what hit her." I stopped the video. The silence rushed back into my room. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and took a long, deep breath. They weren't just socially arrogant. They weren't just dismissive bullies. They were corporate thieves. And I held the absolute, indisputable receipt. The engagement party at the Oak Ridge Country Club was, by every conceivable metric, an absolute, overwhelming spectacle. I mean, it was truly staggering to witness. Cascading walls of imported white orchids were practically dripping from the vaulted architectural arches, filling the air with a heavy, expensive perfume. A live string quartet was situated perfectly in the manicured garden, playing a flawless rendition of Vivaldi. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a carefully orchestrated coronation. My mother, Margaret, was gliding flawlessly around the grand ballroom, practically soaking in the reflected glory of the 250 elite guests. She was in her absolute element, a maestro conducting a symphony of high society networking. I walked in through the heavy mahogany doors wearing a simple, tailored navy blue dress. It was professional, crisp, and entirely clean. My mother spotted me from across the room, and her tense shoulders visibly relaxed. She rushed over, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor, and grabbed my arm in a grip that was just a fraction too tight to be affectionate. "Elena, darling, you actually came," she whispered, her painted smile strained and urgent. "Thank you. Now, please, just play your part tonight. Be nice." "I won't do anything, Mom," I said smoothly, and in that precise moment, I meant it. I wasn't going to do anything. I was simply going to let them do it to themselves. I smiled. I nodded politely to passing acquaintances. I ordered a simple glass of club soda with a lime wedge. From the edge of the room, I quietly watched my brother, Derek, and his fiancé, Victoria, stand perfectly in the center of the ballroom like a plastic power couple from a remarkably bad corporate movie. Eventually, someone tapped a crystal glass, and the toasts began. My father, Harrison, went first. His booming, authoritative voice echoed through the microphone, talking endlessly about this wonderful new addition to our family legacy and tossing around buzzwords like synergy. He clearly didn't actually know what the word meant in a structural business context, but it sounded appropriately expensive to the crowd. Derek spoke next. Beaming with manufactured charm, he talked grandly about closing the real estate deal of a lifetime, gesturing theatrically to Victoria. And then, riding high on the intoxicating fumes of his own public performance, he lifted his champagne flute and pointed it directly at me, standing quietly in the shadows at the back of the room. And I really want to give a very special shout-out to my little sister, Elena. 250 heads turned in unison. I just stood there, holding my club soda, my face completely neutral. "I know we've had our differences recently," Derek said, laughing a rich, booming laugh to the amused crowd. "But I'm just so glad you're here tonight, Ellie. I'm so glad you finally get a chance to see what real, tangible success actually looks like." The polite applause washed over the room, but I wasn't listening to the clapping. I was watching Victoria. She was looking directly at me. She was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smug, deeply self-satisfied smirk. The definitive smile of someone who genuinely, truly believed they had already won the chess match. And as I watched her, a psychological concept crystallized perfectly in my mind. This was the Dunning-Kruger effect, wrapped in a $10,000 designer dress. It's a well-documented cognitive bias where individuals with exceptionally low ability at a specific task drastically overestimate their own competence. They know just enough surface-level information, just enough trendy jargon like AI, machine learning, and algorithm to convince themselves they are brilliant experts. But they actually know so incredibly little that they are entirely blind to their own profound incompetence. Victoria wasn't just arrogant. She was fundamentally, structurally, mediocre. Her towering confidence wasn't built on a foundation of actual knowledge or skill. It was built on a complete, breathtaking lack of it. She genuinely thought she was the smartest predator in the room. She honestly believed she was going to comfortably get away with stealing my life's work. She had absolutely no idea that the boring, predictable little accounting girl in the plain navy dress wasn't just standing quietly in the room. I was the one who engineered the very vault she was trying to rob. May I say a few words? I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait for a polite nod. I just smoothly walked forward and slipped the microphone from the polished silver stand. The live string quartet abruptly faded into a confused, discordant scrape of bows. The massive ballroom, which had been buzzing with champagne-fueled laughter, went completely, terrifyingly silent. Derek and Victoria were frozen on the small stage, both staring down at me with that identical, nervous, deeply annoyed expression. I smiled. A tight, perfectly polite, devastatingly cold smile. Congratulations to my brother, Derek, and to his lovely fiancé, Victoria. I paused. I just wanted to take a moment to say, Victoria, you were absolutely right. I let that sentence hang in the heavy, perfumed air. She looked confused, suspicious. You were right at our family dinner last week. My job as an accountant is incredibly boring. I swept my calm gaze across the sea of bewildered, wealthy faces at the Oak Ridge Country Club. It is profoundly tedious, especially when you have to sit alone in the dark and review hours upon hours of internal security footage. Tedious, grainy video files. Exactly like this one. I calmly reached into my tailored navy dress pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I walked deliberately over to the high-end projector they had been using for their glossy, airbrushed engagement photo slideshow, and I simply plugged in my adapter. The massive screen on the wall flickered. The smiling, perfect photos of Derek and Victoria instantly vanished. They were replaced by a grainy but unmistakably clear view of a familiar corporate conference room. And then Victoria's voice, not her breathy, charming country club voice, but her real, sharp, predatory corporate tone blasted through the ballroom's state-of-the-art surround sound system. Forget going through the front door. We don't need to actually buy it. Just shatter this piece right here, the recorded Victoria commanded from the screen. Extract the core algorithm, and we'll build our own in-house clone. By the time we launch it, the clueless little bean counter who coded this garbage will never even know what hit her. You could have heard a single pearl drop onto the thick, woven carpet. It was a very special, very rare kind of silence. A sharp, collective, horrified intake of breath from 250 of the city's elite. My father, Harrison, looked as though he had been physically struck by a train. My mother's perfectly manicured hand was clamped violently over her mouth. Derek just stood staring blindly at the massive screen, his face completely, utterly wiped blank with pure shock. Victoria's face was no longer smug. It was a twisted, hideous mask of pure, reptilian panic and rage. She lunged forward off the stage, desperately trying to rip the microphone from my hand. "You little," she hissed. I simply held up one hand. I didn't even need to raise my voice. "Don't." My tone was absolute zero. It cut right through her frantic anger like a diamond blade. That, Victoria, is called premeditated intellectual property theft. It is highly illegal. And you just broadcast your explicit, undeniable confession to about 250 of your closest friends, family members, and business colleagues. I turned back to the stunned, paralyzed crowd. But that is actually not the only breaking news we have to celebrate tonight. As some of you just heard, I am the sole founder and lead developer of Verytrace AI. I forced myself to look directly at my parents. Their faces were chalk white, entirely stripped of all their performative arrogance. And last Tuesday, I signed a $14.5 million licensing deal for that exact software. My mother let out a small, choked, gasping noise. "But here is the part you are really going to love, Victoria," I said, slowly turning back to face her. She was frozen in place, her hands still trembling in the air. "I didn't actually sell my company outright. We are executing a strategic merger. The final paperwork was signed this morning. Veritrace AI is officially merging with the parent holding conglomerate of your venture capital fund." I took a slow, deliberate breath. "My new role, effective this coming Monday morning at 8 a.m., is Global Head of Digital Compliance and Asset Security." I let that massive reality sink in. I watched the remaining blood physically drain from her face as her brain desperately did the corporate math. "Which means, technically speaking, Victoria, I am now your boss's boss." I gave her one last, infinitesimally small, devastatingly professional smile. "I will see you bright and early on Monday morning for that performance review." I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I didn't need to. I placed the microphone carefully, deliberately back onto its polished silver stand. The small, amplified click echoed loudly in the dead, heavy silence of the room. And then I turned around, and I walked straight out of the Oak Ridge Country Club ballroom, never looking back. The professional fallout, I heard later through the corporate grapevine, was not explosive or dramatically satisfying. It was swift, clinical, and profoundly cold, the kind of ruthless efficiency that only Wall Street legal departments truly understand. Victoria was unceremoniously fired before 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And no, I wasn't the one who did it. I never even had to step foot inside that gleaming glass office building. The parent conglomerate's elite legal team simply reviewed the high-definition video file, which I had politely forwarded to their managing partners on Sunday evening, conveniently attached to my newly signed $14.5 million employment contract, and they immediately escorted her off the premises. There was absolutely no argument. There were no negotiations. There was just a humiliating cardboard box for her desk plants and a towering security guard demanding her corporate keycard. My older brother, Derek, the untouchable golden child, didn't lose his lucrative real estate job, but he lost something infinitely more valuable to a narcissist, his captive audience. He didn't even get the dignity of canceling the engagement. Victoria did that. She vanished entirely from the social scene. The last rumor I heard was that her desperate lawyers tried to sue me for an illegal invasion of privacy. They lost, spectacularly. Derek was suddenly reduced to playing the pitiable role of the naive, foolish boy who got thoroughly conned by a corporate thief. He became the favorite subject of hushed, mocking whispers in the locker rooms of the Oak Ridge Country Club. His manufactured shine was permanently gone. His sterling reputation, the single, shallow currency he had ever truly valued in his life, was now completely worthless. And my parents? Harrison and Margaret? "Oh," they called. They called dozens and dozens of times. The frantic missed calls rapidly piled up into a mountain of desperate voicemails. First, they were furious. "Elena, what on earth have you done? You've made an absolute public fool of this entire family." Then, as the reality of my wealth set in, they became profoundly confused. "Ellie, sweetheart, please call us back. We really need to sit down and talk. We need to fix this misunderstanding before it gets out of hand." And finally, they just sounded utterly, brokenly desperate. My mother's perfectly polished voice cracking through the digital speaker of my phone. "Elena, please. You've made your point. You are so successful now. Just stop ignoring us. You're tearing this family apart." But even then, they still fundamentally didn't get it. I wasn't tearing the family apart. I was simply flipping on the harsh fluorescent lights so everyone could finally, clearly see the deep, structural cracks that had been decaying there all along. I didn't do it to teach them a lesson or to make a grand point. I did it simply to permanently end the conversation. That entire week, I sat alone in the quiet peace of my apartment. I opened my laptop and looked at the final, executed spreadsheet that detailed the $14.5 million merger. I stared at the massive string of zeros. And for the very first time in my entire adult life, it didn't feel like a heavy, dangerous secret I had to protect. It just felt like pure, unadulterated freedom. I booked a one-way, first-class flight to the Amalfi Coast in Italy. I gently closed my laptop. The satisfying metallic click of the aluminum lid shutting sounded beautifully final. It sounded like the locking of a heavy, impenetrable vault door, like the very last page turning in a very long, very exhausting, and very heavy emotional ledger. That night, for the first time in as long as I can possibly remember, I slept peacefully straight through until the morning sun hit my window. There was no lingering guilt. There was no family noise. There was just absolute perfect silence. And it was incredibly beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to my story tonight. Sometimes, remaining silent in the face of toxicity isn't a sign of weakness. Sometimes, it's just the quiet time you need to spend doing the audit on your own life. If you've ever found yourself forced to choose between keeping your family's toxic peace and standing firmly in your own truth, I want to hear from you. Share your story down in the comments. And please, don't forget to subscribe to Karma's Coils so you never miss the next tale of justice served cold.